You asked for it and I listened. My previous video on dangerous old cinema barely scratched the surface, and let's be honest, the edit didn't capture the sheer madness of what was happening on screen a century ago. You guys called me out for the gaps and the vibe, so I've recut everything, fixed the audio, and dug up the facts the history books tried to ignore. Do you still believe the black and white era was a time of pure, repressed innocence? Think again. Before the Hays Code turned Hollywood into a sanitized zone in 1934, directors operated in a state of absolute creative anarchy. This was the Wild West of cinema, a time when on-screen erotica, visceral violence, and the raw, unashamed display of the female form had no limits. The real sexual revolution didn't start in the 60s, it began 50 years earlier. Today, I'm showing you the 12 most risqué, forbidden films made before 1930. Get ready, this is how shameless cinema was born. Number 12. The Cheat, 1915. We're starting with a psychological bomb that Cecil B. DeMille dropped on a shocked American public in 1915. While he's now remembered for massive biblical epics, back then he was interested in something far more primal. The film follows Edith Hardy, a socialite who finds herself in a desperate debt to a wealthy businessman named Hishuru Tori. When she tries to repay him with cash instead of her body, the film takes a turn that left 1915 audiences hyperventilating. In a moment of terrifying dominance, Tori seizes a branding iron and marks Edith's bare shoulder, literally claiming her as his property. To make the scene even more visceral, DeMille utilized revolutionary Rembrandt lighting, deep, harsh shadows that intensified the look of the exposed skin and the terror on actress Fanny Ward's face. The public was in a state of furious fascination. The film was a massive hit, but triggered waves of protests. It proved that violence and erotic subtext were the fastest ways to the box office, forcing the studio to eventually reshoot parts of the film just to pacify the mobs. Number 11. Häxan, 1922. If you want to talk about the ultimate shame-free film, we have to talk about Benjamin Christensen's Häxan. This isn't just a movie, it's a visual fever dream that blurs the lines between a documentary and a graphic horror nightmare. Christensen spent years researching medieval woodcuts to recreate the aesthetics of hell with terrifying precision. At the heart of this film, erotica is tightly woven with religious fanaticism. We witness scenes of naked witches participating in ecstatic Sabbaths, performing dark rituals that were unheard of in 1922. Christensen was a genius at bypassing the moral police. He claimed he was depicting historical hysteria, which allowed him to show the female body in states of diabolical possession and ritualistic nudity. The most scandalous sequence, which sent censors into a total frenzy, depicts witches lining up to kiss the devil's backside in a ritual of black worship. This act of ultimate blasphemy led to the film being banned in the US and France for decades. Even today, the practical effects and the raw, sexualized imagery look so organic and unsettling that they continue to influence modern masters of horror. Number 10. Metropolis, 1927. Next is Fritz Lang's Metropolis, a production born out of pure, unadulterated suffering. While it's a sci-fi masterpiece, the boldness behind the scenes was borderline criminal. Lang was a notorious dictator, forcing 750 child extras to stand in freezing water for 14 hours a day during the flooding scenes. But the real scandal was the film's eroticized center, the robot Maria. The star, Bridget Helm, was nearly killed during the scene where her character is burned at the stake because Lang used real flames that scorched her metal costume. Beyond the technical madness, the film featured shameless themes of occultism and featured a highly eroticized robot vampire that terrified distributors. They were so shocked by the film's perverted aesthetic and class war themes that they mutilated the original 3-hour cut, and the full version was considered lost for 80 years. Metropolis stands as a monument to a time when directors were willing to sacrifice money, health, and even lives to capture a vision of the future that was as seductive as it was dangerous. Number 9. Salome, 1923. If there's one film that defines artistic rebellion through the lens of forbidden beauty, it's Salome. Alla Nazimova, one of Hollywood's first openly bisexual titans, gambled her entire $350,000 fortune, her life savings, on this avant-garde experiment. She wasn't just making a movie, she was throwing a middle finger at the growing conservative movement in America. The film looks like a psychedelic dream, with every frame inspired by the forbidden illustrations of Aubrey Beardsley. But the real scandal was the transparency. The costumes were crafted from translucent fabrics, silver pearls, and peacock feathers, creating a look that was highly eroticized and alien. During the legendary Dance of the Seven Veils, Nazimova's movements were filmed through skin-tight, see-through veils that left censors absolutely speechless. Behind the camera, the gossip was even wilder. Nazimova allegedly cast only LGBTQ+ performers in what was called an all-lavender production to honor Oscar Wilde. The mainstream public was so terrified by its perverted aesthetic that the film failed commercially and Nazimova was effectively blacklisted by big studios. Next, we have the film that gave us the ultimate shameless icon, Louise Brooks as Lulu. While other actresses of the era were stuck in exaggerated theatrical poses, Brooks was natural, modern, and terrifyingly direct. With her razor-sharp black bob and unblinking gaze, she created a character who lived purely for her own pleasure, a woman who destroyed every life she touched simply because she was an unstoppable force of sexuality. But what really made Pandora's box a target for the moral police was its explicit portrayal of lesbian attraction. The character of Countess Geswitz is shown to be hopelessly in love with Lulu, marking the first time a major motion picture treated same-sex attraction with such gravity and realism. Critics were vicious, calling the film morally repellent and a stain on the screen because it refused to judge or punish Lulu for her sexuality until the very end. Brooks refused to play the Hollywood game and was eventually driven out of the industry, but her performance remains a feminist manifesto of sexual autonomy. Number 7. Un Chien Andaluz, 1929. Now we enter the realm of cinematic terrorism. Salvador Dalí and Luis Buñuel didn't just want to make a short film, they wanted to assault the viewer. This 16-minute burst of surrealism is famous for the ultimate dare, a man calmly sharpening a razor and then seemingly slicing open a woman's eyeball while a cloud passes over the moon. It was a deliberate attack on logic and vision. The film is a dream logic sequence of disconnected taboos. In between the shocking gore, we see a man attempting to assault a woman while dragging the literal weight of the church, represented by priests tied to ropes, behind him. Buñuel was so certain the audience would riot at the premiere that he filled his pockets with stones to defend himself. To his shock, the high society crowd applauded. However, the censors were not as forgiving. The film was banned in several countries for its obscene and blasphemous imagery. It remains the most important underground film ever made, proving that the boldest act a filmmaker can perform is to refuse to be understood. Number 6. The Sheik, 1921. If you want to understand the birth of the male sex symbol, you have to look at Rudolph Valentino in The Sheik. This film ignited a global moral panic because it was a raw, unfiltered fantasy of female desire that absolutely terrified the men of 1921. Valentino plays a desert chieftain who kidnaps an English socialite, and the tension in those desert tents was enough to make theatergoers lose their minds. When Valentino looked into the camera with those heavy-lidded, smoldering eyes, women were reportedly fainting in the aisles. Theaters actually had to hire extra staff just to carry them out. Religious leaders were outraged, calling Valentino a pink powder puff and a threat to American masculinity. They were terrified by how the film depicted a woman falling for her captor, exposing the deep, unspoken fantasies of the female audience. While men mocked him, women bought chic-branded perfumes by the millions. Valentino's presence was so bold that his early death triggered mass hysteria and even suicides, proving that a seductive screen presence could exert a power that no censor could ever control. Number 5. Battleship Potemkin, 1925. Now we move from the bedroom to the streets. Sergei Eisenstein didn't just want to entertain, he wanted to use cinema as a psychological trigger for revolution. The Odessa Steppe sequence is perhaps the most influential 6 minutes in film history, and it is brutally visceral. Eisenstein used a collision montage, cutting rapidly between 150 different shots to create a sense of panic and fury. We see a woman's glasses shattered by a whip, and a baby carriage bouncing helplessly down the steps while soldiers fire indiscriminately into the crowd. The imagery was so powerful and shamelessly manipulative that governments in Britain and even Nazi Germany banned the film, fearing it would incite the public to mutiny. The British Board of Film Censors kept it under a total ban until 1954, an unprecedented length of time for a movie. Eisenstein proved that the boldest thing a filmmaker can do is manipulate the very rhythm of time and space to control the human heartbeat. Number 4. The Birth of a Nation, 1915. We cannot discuss bold cinema without looking at its darkest, most dangerous side. The Birth of a Nation is the most painful paradox in history. On one hand, D.W. Griffith invented the modern language of film here, using the first close-ups to show emotion and coordinating massive battle scenes. But he used these brilliant innovations to tell a story of horrific racism, portraying the Ku Klux Klan as heroic saviors. The film features white actors in crude blackface, depicting Black Americans as animalistic predators, a shameless distortion that led to real-world lynchings and a revival of the KKK. Despite massive protests and riots, it became the first film ever screened at the White House. It is a chilling reminder that technical boldness, when stripped of a moral compass, can become the most dangerous weapon of propaganda ever created. Number 3. Foolish Wives, 1922. If there was a king of cinematic excess, it was Erich von Stroheim. In Foolish Wives, he didn't just push the boundaries of decency, he annihilated them. Stroheim played a fake Russian count who seduces wealthy women, and he did it with a level of shameless realism that shocked the 1920s. The film was a masterclass in the aesthetic of the forbidden. Stroheim insisted on absolute authenticity, spending a fortune to rebuild Monte Carlo on a Hollywood lot. But it was a sexual subtext that drew the fire of the censors. The film featured scenes of voyeurism and implied sexual violence that were unheard of. Stroheim was obsessed with the darker, more carnal side of human nature, often lingering on the details of the female form and the predatory nature of his characters. It was one of the first films to be labeled morally objectionable by nearly every censorship board, yet audiences flocked to see the very perversions critics warned them about. Just as the silent era was ending, Luis Buñuel and Salvador Dalí teamed up again to release what might be the most blasphemous film ever made, L'Âge d'Or. If Un Chien Andalou was a warning shot, this was a full-scale massacre of social norms. The film is a celebration of l'amour fou, mad, uncontrollable love that refuses to be tamed by the church or the state. The most scandalous scenes involved a woman passionately sucking the toe of a statue, and a final sequence that linked the works of the Marquis de Sade with religious figures. It was a direct, visual assault on the sanctity of the family and the church. When it premiered in Paris, right-wing groups rioted, throwing ink at the screen and destroying the theater lobby. The film was banned for over 50 years. It stands as a testament to the power of the image to incite literal violence by simply showing the shameless truth of human desire. Number 1. Ecstasy, 1933. And finally, we reach the film that became the ultimate symbol of pre-code provocation, Ecstasy. This film made Hedy Lamarr an overnight sensation and a permanent target for censors worldwide. Why? Because it featured the first non-pornographic depiction of a woman's face during a climax, and more famously, an extended scene of Lamarr swimming and running through the woods completely nude. There were no clever camera angles or strategically placed shadows. It was a raw, unashamed celebration of the female body. The Pope condemned it, Hitler banned it, and in America, the Customs Office seized the film as obscene. But the damage was done. Ecstasy proved that cinema had the power to capture the most intimate moments of human existence. It was the final, boldest scream of an era that refused to be silenced, until the Hays Code finally slammed the door shut in 1934. So, there you have it. The real archives, the real scandals, and the films that proved cinema was born with a sense of rebellion. As you've seen, shamelessness isn't a modern invention. Directors 100 years ago were risking their freedom for a single daring frame. Which of these forbidden masterpieces shocked you the most? Should they have been banned, or were the censors just afraid of the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this director's cut, hit that like button and subscribe. We're just scratching the surface of cinema's darkest secrets. I'll see you in the next one.